Hello and welcome. We are so excited to welcome you to Living Cities Earth experience. Please enjoy the next few minutes, and we hope that this video and the ideas from our speakers will change your life to the better. Listen carefully. What particularly talks to you? What might have a chance to change your life and lives of people around you? Also, life of your place and our planet. We believe that you, the leaders of positive change, are those who define the future. So let's work together. And thank you for coming. We will be talking about subjects which are very important to the experience of a living, happy, flourishing city. And there are two, basically. One is how do we create or help facilitate creating vibrant communities, right? We touched upon this, of course, in our prior discussions. But right now, it's very important to talk about specific tools, specific approaches, specific frameworks we could share. Because after all the Earth Day celebration and after all of our discussions, we will have the magnificent task of dealing with 10,000 cities. As we discovered, they're all different economic conditions, cultural, multilingual, different, trauma, social trauma, individual traumas. So how do we approach the immense task of supporting this vibrant community flourishing, right? That's the number one. And the second part of our discussion is how do we create action networks, be it local action networks, we spoke about them a little bit as well earlier, but also intercity action networks and global action networks, because we are building one of such action networks, combining leaders, combining institutions. So how do we go about it? To start with our discussion, I would like to introduce first Sanford Hinden. So Sanford is a citizen of Earth. When we were asking him to provide the city and the country, he said, I don't have a specific city or country I sort of fully relate myself to. So I asked our colleagues to put in the program Earth citizen. Sandy, is it okay?
Yes.
Okay. Well, Sandy is currently residing in the northern hemisphere, specifically in North America, and not too far from, as far as I understand, New York City, in the sort of outskirts, or maybe the Long Island. Where are you exactly over there?
Yes, you say it Long Island, like that's an inside joke. We don't have time to go into it, but Long Island, yes.
Anyway, and we asked Sandy to start off our discussion with actually giving a presentation on community learning labs, and then we'll discuss this and other aspects of creating communities and action networks. So Sandy, on to you. Do you have the rights to share the screen?
Yeah, I'll share the screen now. And here we go. And I hope you can see this. You can see it now?
Yes.
You can see the screen. Okay, and I'll turn it on to share from screen. And oh, that's why. Hold on one second. Shares. Okay. To begin, thank you for inviting me into this. Alexander, thank you so much. Alexander and I know each other for a long time. I knew his father before I knew him. And so that's how old I am. And so I worked with a colleague of his father's. My mentor was a colleague of his father's at the United Nations. And so I come with great reverence for his family. And Alexander has connected with so many of you and with all of you and brought you to this amazing table that we're at. My background is in psychology. I started in psychology, but then graduated into social psychology, and then sociology, and then economics, and then politics, political theory, and then communications, and then I eventually drifted to the United Nations and worked for Planetary Citizens when I got out of college. And that was like a world citizens organization closely associated with World Federalists. So I'm still trying to create a global government for the people. people's world government, and I still working on that. So I finally got a real job after numerous jobs in the nonprofit sector where I failed one after another. I started Universal Children's Gardens and then Peace Museums and all kinds of things, and they kept failing. And I never understood why they failed until I went to fundraising school to learn how to be a fundraiser. And then I learned about the economics of fundraising and how you had to have wealthy people on your boards or you never raised any money, so your organizations failed all the time. So like that led me to getting a couple of real jobs towards the end of my career in the nonprofit sector. And the last one was I managed a performing arts center in a college. So I learned a lot about marketing, and so marketing is always on my consciousness about how do we reach the people that we're trying to get into our programs, and who are they? Who are these people? So I worked finally my way into a world called Wiseocracy, which I created. I've always been creating projects. So I put wise and democracy together, and I created a concept called Wiseocracy to create wise democracy, wisdom, and well-being. I have that on the website, and it's wiseocracy.world. I look at psychology, economics, and politics and how they connect, and I connect the dots between them. So I love donut economics. I like well-being economy. I like circular economy. I like all the new economies that are out there. And I knew about Hazel Henderson's work years ago, and she led into all of that. And then, well, then you'll see how it ties into integral and into spiral dynamics. So I try to create wise people, help people activate the inner wisdom inside them. Roberto Assigioli was an Italian psychiatrist, psychologist, and he would introduce people to the inner wise one, the wise one within. That's what he called it, that we had a wise one within ourselves, but you had to access it. So he had a guided imagery where he would help his clients access the wise one within. So I always remembered that. So I'm looking at wise economics, wise politics, and wise governance. Now, I realized I've been working on all these levels except the city level. I really never worked on the city level. So it's interesting how I was asked into this program because you're working on wise cities. And I'm saying, wow, that's amazing. I've been in these levels and I worked on these levels, created programs for these levels. And I've worked on these levels and created programs for them, but I never worked on the city level. So it's wonderful that you're doing this work. And I would like to help pour my knowledge of these areas into cities. So I'm looking forward to that. Now, I analyzed democracy. There's numerous ways to get at democracy. There's democracy indexes around the world, and you can look at them. So this is a marketing tool, actually, for how do we market democracy, what it's doing, and you'll see how it relates to other marketing tools. So we're trying to create wisdom and well-being in the world and fund people, society, and nature. Donut economics clarified that tremendously. I had created a Commonwealth for Earth and Humanity that Alexander helped me with, and we were looking at 4 buckets rather than all the planetary boundaries and the social needs on the inner core of donut economics. We only had 4 buckets. They were human development, social development, infrastructure, and earth care. So those were the 4 buckets. But now donut economics has clarified that further, which has made it better. And so that's what we're trying to create with wise cities and wise countries and the whole wise planet. Ananias wants the wise earth. She's working with wise earth. So we're trying to create that here. Now, we only have 6.4% of the world's population in full democracies. The United States has been demoted to a flawed democracy. and we have hybrid regimes, and this is where a lot of wars take place in the hybrid regimes, either because they're falling apart from democracy, or they're coming out of totalitarian and they're becoming more democratic. So they're combinations, and you get all kinds of chaos and conflict in here. So then you have authoritarian regimes in the world, and you can go towards totalitarian control. So currently the scorecard is we're losing. You know, we're only at 45% to 54%. And look, and full democracies are only 6.4%. So all the wonderful happy cities that you're going to try to create are, you know, pretty much going to be in 6.4% of the population right now, but then we're going to try to create more happy cities. And now I did this analysis based on, I'm overlaid a political model onto the diffusion of innovation model. Okay, so the diffusion of like if you invented a cell phone, you'd be over here. You'd be an inventor. You created the smartphone, and then you tried to sell it to the next 10% of the people, and that was the quick early adopters. They were in here, and then you tried to reach the early majority of people to sell the cell phones, and they bought the cell phones. You know, they have 2-3 years later, they started buying cell phones, and then you got to these later people here, and then these people never bought the cell phones. Okay, there's still a few people on the planet that, not that people, if they can't afford it, that's one thing, but then there's people who don't want a cell phone. Okay, so they're called the laggards, you know. So this is marketing, a marketing model, but now there's an overlay. I put an overlay of politics on top of this. Okay, so here's the right. This is the right and the far right. This is the left, essentially. Here, this is the centrists in here. Okay, and now I'll give you all this. You can have a copy of this document. Anybody who wants it, I'll give you a copy of the whole document. You can get it off my Wisenocracy website, or I'll send it to you. Contact me at sanford.hinden@gmail.com. That's my new email address, because I'm flooded with junk mail on my regular email address. So now here's a real political, this is like the United States terms, what they call it. And these are the issues that fall into these buckets, these 7 buckets from the far right to the far left. Okay, so we're in pretty much in here in the far left. Okay, like maybe 11 thought 1% of the population was in here. Okay, and this is like the advanced consciousness, advanced thinking, new thinking, innovations. It's all coming out of here. And then here is the people. If we go back to this, you can see this group is well funded all around the world by governments and by oligarchs and by some pretty wicked people, you know, and they are creating chaos around the world. Okay, so that's this group on the right. This is what we're up against: brutalists, dominators, racists. You know, they love guns, they love fossil fuels, you know, so this is what we're up against, and like trying to transform. I don't like the term against, you know, because that puts us in us versus them. I've been working on this down here, this World Federalist. This must be 1/100th of 1% of the population, you know, like cares about a people's world government for Earth and humanity, you know. So that's where I've been working, you know. That's why, you know, you don't see me too much on the web, because like I'm working with nobody. Now, if you flip these charts, you know, going sideways and compare it to spiral dynamics, they kind of pretty much line up. I'm not kidding you. They really do line up. And so these reds and blues, they call them, the reds and the blues are in here, what we're dealing with, and the orange is, and we're in the greens, and then, this is the future world. If we're going to still, some of the people will become more evolved and past us, and they'll understand what these higher levels of consciousness are. And so now I overlaid the donut economics in here into what I was working with mutually assured survival rather than mutually assured destruction. Julie Johnston is a great environmentalist. She came up with the term, of Canada, she came up with the term mutually assured survival. And so we need trust building and peace building. And I overlaid the Commonwealth for Earth and Humanity, global demilitarization through 10% military reductions to have the money to fund these things. Okay, so we need global militarization. As we're doing healthy cities, we've got to demilitarize and use that money for 10% military reductions a year, but it's got to be globally, because nobody's going to do it unilaterally. And then we need to end fossil fuels by making corporations pay costs of health and environmental damage that they're causing. They externalize their costs. They push it off their balance sheets onto the public to pay for all of this stuff. Well, if we made them pay for this, they'd have to stop their fossil fuel productions, and then we can get on with remediating these subsystems of the Earth's system. They all need remediation, and we need the money for these social and human needs, as we say here. And this is donut economics right here. Okay, then if you look at the needs hierarchy, I put together Maslow's needs hierarchy, Max Neef's needs that he wanted, and also Marshall Rosenberg's work with needs and feelings. I put them all together on this chart. You'll have this chart. And when our needs are not satisfied, it creates emotional and social conflicts. So I figured out that what made me, I was banging my head against the wall so many times with nonprofits that didn't work. Why don't these people join these wonderful groups that I create? And it's because they have different things are going on for them in their lives. And based on remember, they're on that political spectrum. So they have needs that are blocking them from getting involved. And if we could help fulfill their needs, we can involve them in our organizations. Now, remember, you'll have this whole thing, so you don't have to worry about it. Now, then I realized, I heard someplace that somebody said these people can't afford to care about saving the planet. They're just surviving, living day to day. They're struggling to survive, to find food, water, shelter. And that's about these are all estimates. So about 2 billion people, about 2 billion are striving. They can almost afford to care, but they don't care. Some of them do. There's always people within this that can be strived. So Maslow's needs hierarchy is non-hierarchical in terms, because some people on a low level, like I was I didn't never made a lot of money in my life. So I was always on a low level financially, but I somehow, I love the cosmos because I learned about Teilhard Chardin's work. And so I love, and Cosmos from, what was his name? Alexander, what was his name? The guy who created Cosmos.
Carl Sagan.
Yeah, Carl Sagan. I loved his work. So like I was always cosmic. I like your Cosmo local stuff today that you put out, Alexander. So some people, struggling artists, for some reason, artists they're always on the transcendent level. They're always trying to break through to society, make better things for society. So artists can always think above their sustenance level in the needs hierarchy. So these people, some of them can't afford to care, but they don't care. They can almost afford to care, but they're struggling to succeed. Week to week, they're struggling. Okay, then there's 1 billion people and another 1 billion people succeeding and advantage, and us, we're in the caring people. So this is also an interesting thing that's going on here. So in this level, they can afford to care, but they don't care for some reason. And we've been trying to involve them, and they don't want to be involved. So like, so this is the average status quo person. They're climbing the ladder of success. They're stuck in consumerism, essentially, and they vote for who supports cheap gas. They have fear of crime and competition. So they support the police and military to preserve their advantages, and they have very high CO2. That's both these groups. And then you have an elite status quo group. They're protecting wealth and competitive, and they're very competitive. They're proud of their high carbon lifestyles. They'll show off. They show off their high carbon lifestyles. And then there's the caring people like us, 2 billion of us, I estimate, and they're in many nonprofits, health and human services, education, philanthropists. They can afford to care, and they do care, and we care. But unfortunately, we're competing against each other. Anna, she talked about it briefly yesterday, that we're competing for resources and for recognition. This is terrible that we have to compete with each other. We could do it, but I'm so happy that Lev is bringing us, and others, and the others of them, Marilyn and all the others, you bringing us all together, and Alexander, so that we can work together if we can. And we attend lots of conferences, but there's little or no incentives to collaborate with each other. Okay. Now, when I saw that this group in the yellow, I said, these 2 billion people are wrecking the planet, essentially, because they have the high carbon lifestyles. These 4 billion people, they don't have high carbon lifestyles. These 2 billion people do. So they're wrecking the planet. And I said, well, how are we going to get them involved? We have to get them to be involved in something. They have to help with the solutions. So this is what I came up with. But first, let me clarify this. Humans are mentally confused and deteriorating from conflict and insane media. That's why I created Wiseocracy. They fall prey to their own confused words and thinking. They drive themselves crazy and they believe it. And then people can easily get lost in quests for money and power. Humans are destroying the earth. So it's really us humans that have the problem. So we're going to be we're all in all these cities, but it's the humans that are wrecking everything. So boys and that I did years ago, I spoke up at the United Nations Interfaith Conference for Peace in 2005, that the Muslim nations had created to try to create peace, because they had seen what happened with the World Trade Center. So they were trying to create peace at the United Nations. They created the Interfaith Conference for Peace. I stood up and I spoke up. I said, you're never going to have peace on this world unless people have work, unless men have work, because men create all the problems. Men, and remember, at the same time, all the women's organizations were pounding away at the United Nations to get more programs for women. Well, I say you needed programs for men, because if men don't have work, they can't have relationships. There's no money, that no woman is going to go. They don't go near men without money, because they want money for their children, for sustenance, and to be able to take care of their children. So they look for men who have decent jobs. So if men don't have work, they're not going to be able to have relationships. They'll never be able to have families. So then if they can't have families, they're going to sell drugs, guns, sex, violence, and everything else under the sun. And so and then they end up in prison or dead, And so I came back to Long Island, and I started the Long Island Men's Center to try to help men. And that was in 2005. And I've been trying to help men since then. So we have a special program in Wiseocracy for men, for boys and men, because men get into trouble and they make a wreck out of out of families, out of communities, out of the whole planet. So Wiseocracy is trying to help activate wisdom and well-being. And I then came up with the idea for a local community learning labs. I was trying to do it in Haiti, which is undergoing terrible situations right now. And I realized I can't do it because the gangs won't do it. The gangs won't be involved. I'm working on world gang transformation projects also. So but then I realized, well, we can do this in countries where there is democracy right now. And the first step is, if we created 1,000 learning labs inside the 1,000 cities, that would be a start. You need a learning lab in every community in the whole world. So be conscious and collaborative with your creative wisdom and watch your well-being, peace, and nature flourish. These are the basic concepts. 2, you will be so excited, you will want to meet regularly. There's nothing like a great community group. If you have a local community group, you feel fantastic every week to go to that community group. You just feel good because you're meeting your people, and it feels great. And so then relax and meditate to brainstorm with others. Now, most people don't know that you need to meditate and relax so that you can activate your higher thinking, your higher mind, because that's where the wisdom is. If you don't quiet down the mind, you can't ask your own inner wisdom a question, and then it won't give you if you quiet down your mind, you can ask yourself a question and quietly listen for the answer. That used to be called the inner voice of God, the still, small, quiet voice of God. It's really your higher brain functions putting together your understood wisdom, the experiences that you've had, the knowledge that you've learned, and all of your creative thinking, the powers of the creative imagination. So they connect, and then you hear an amazing answer. Okay, so if you meditated with others and you brainstormed, you come up with great ideas. You could do research on the internet now, and you could, between your creative thinking and the information you come up with on the internet, you can make breakthrough ideas in your local community. And then you know what you do. So then you start interacting with your politicians, your elected officials, and you make your voice heard. Share your solutions with elected officials, create positive policies, programs, and legislation. That's how the political process works. You have to create a policy, then a program, and then legislation to fund the program, and that's how it works. So replace wasting time with learning and communicating. And what do I have in the other corner? I have to move, I have to move the things. So co-create the community you want with your thinking and with your relating to each other and your emotions and your feelings and feeling alive and creative and all of the wonderful things on the top of the needs hierarchy there. Okay, so that's it, folks. So I'll share this with anybody who wants it, and I hope I didn't go over my time. So thank
Sandy,
you.
it was perfect. Thank you so much. That's wonderful. And now we're going to move into a conversation period with Lorna and others. Lev, I'm going to pass it to you so you can say something. But to mention that very rich, Sandy, and we have shared the slides. You have shared it, first of all, on the speakers list. We've shared it on another list. It's going to be made available to everyone, so that's phenomenal. So you can rest assured with that. And I just wanted to say to you in Long Island, sure, this was great. Sure, get a coffee now, because this was just great. Sure.
You got it. You're welcome to Long Island anytime.
I love the way you speak, guys. That's incredible. Thank you, Sandy. Thank you so much. It was very rich. By the way, at some points, a red light goes conspiracy theories. But indeed, when you look inside, every sentence, every word you say, it's just plain understanding of how things are. And it was very kind of you to share this very comprehensive perspective. And also, if I could quickly say, I tried to put it in very simple terms. I put it in both this and some other chats while you were speaking. So forgive me that I oversimplified some things, but I was trying to really to keep the main message. World is full of problems. There are people who are willing and able to make it a better place. They could unite around community learning labs, integrally developing positive action, creating breakthrough ideas and projects, and engage with policymakers and create policies. So each city could have such a lab as center of co-creation, and we can have fun and be fully alive along the way.
Wonderful. Yeah, I will add that to that slideshow as a summation, as you're quoting from you.
Thank you. And the funny thing is that, of course, since we've been exploring and acting on the city integral development scale for the last 10 years, we have seen many examples of something very similar. Yours is very well organized, and it has a beautiful, background of macro dynamics and analysis. So it's very rich and important. But the good news is that there are popping up here and there in democratic countries, in semi-democratic and non-democratic countries, those centers of local co-creation. They are called in many different languages, many different names. But my point is that I think it's like a city institution. There is a city hall, and there should be, or there would be nice to have one or many of such centers in cities, depending on their scale. And one of our tasks at Living Cities Earth is exactly to identify them, because we consider them the leaders of positive change. Normally, there are a few people who organize this and sort of sustain them. So we plan to have a network of such local centers and support each other, and also have some, sort of network projects and organize sort of global events, etc., etc. So everything you have said, we will be putting into practice, and hopefully with you being part of it. And thank you again very much for this beautiful analysis.
That's exactly it. You don't have to call it a community learning lab, by the way. You could, because they're called YMCA's here. It started out as Young Christian Men's Association, but now they have girls, involved also. But it was the big, or the settlement houses they had. They were community centers, essentially. So now you need a community center with a global consciousness and with educational capacities as well built into them.
Well, thank you again for this beautiful introduction. It actually is a sort of a great impulse for us to talk about creating vibrant communities. Sandy was speaking about creating a vibrant community within the city, but also action networks on a larger scale. And I would love to ask Lorna, because you have done so much research and also consulting and actual sort of groundwork in helping organizations to unleash their creative energies and individuals. Please do share your perspectives. How do we create vibrant communities and action networks?
Hi, thanks, Levin. Thank you, Sanford, for a really interesting presentation. I think I want to start with the percentage of the population that you referred to, Sanford, as being perhaps the ones that can afford to care, but perhaps don't, and challenge that a little bit. One of the things I think is important is that we shift the narrative around who cares and who doesn't, because I think it is actually very important to everybody. And within those, and yeah, I do a lot of work. Most of my work is in organisations. And within that, I'm working with individuals and organisations, and I can tell you there are many people that are very successful in their careers, and those who are on the ladder or whatever, and they do care. The thing that they probably face is time and space to think and to do stuff, including their own personal journey into this as well. So I think there's a lot of sense making going on right now, and that's it. Yeah, we said earlier, it's hard work. So to begin to shift that middle 2 million, we have to help them on their journey of understanding and developing as people, wherever they are in the organisation, because they do have resources. They do, but they will also feel that they don't have resources right now. You know, most organisations are very, very strapped for all kinds of cash, people, also they're in turmoil, and they're responsible for the livelihoods of many, many staff. And you know, many of them will have uplifted communities, and their supply chains uplift communities around the world. So when you make a decision in New York, that could impact a life somewhere in Malaysia. And these things really, really matter. So I think they're realizing the whole interconnectivity, and they have to think very carefully about how they make those decisions. So I'm not in the place of defending necessarily. I think I'm just trying to bring attention to the importance of not othering here, and to understand more deeply the journey of change that everybody is on. Likewise, you know, those that are in survival mode, how we can help and uplift without being too preachy or going in to save people, because you know, sustainability is also about helping people to find their own path. You know, is it better to give somebody a fish or teach them how to fish? And I think one of the big dilemmas that has perhaps prevented a level of evolution has been around education, access to education. You know, go back centuries, it's not so long ago and still today that not everybody can read and write. You know, who has access to a computer, a mobile phone? All these things have become very, very normal. We talked earlier about the education around emotional intelligence. You could add spiritual IQ, which is being added to that these days as well. You know, it is accessible to all, and whether we find it is very much a personal choice, whoever you are, wherever you are, whatever our life situation is. So, you know, this is deep work, and we will never move forward unless we put aside the othering and our tribe versus their tribe, and to, you know, get out into the marketplace and connect with where people are actually at, and to get excited about that. You know, as somebody else said earlier, inspiration can come from the most extraordinary of places. And so back to this thing about, you know, education, and the wise one. You know, historically there have been penalties for being wise as well, and there's sort of fear about, you know, becoming too educated. And I think sometimes, going back to corporations, there's often a fear of disruption. You give everybody all the resources, they won't be able to handle them. Give people too much training, they might leave. So we're also dealing with a lot of fear and expectation of a negative outcome. So in shifting the narrative, how can we shift the narrative to be one that is more, well, you know, we could do something really great. We've got to, you know, tap into that creative entrepreneurial energy. That does involve risk. It does involve going outside of ourselves. And it does involve disruption, because the more we keep holding on to old stories, the more we keep judging other people, we stay trapped. And I think, you know, in our discussions here, you know, we've got people, as you know, we've got people that connect and enjoy talking about the same stuff. We can become trapped in our own thinking too. So, you know, I believe, you know, each of us has an opportunity to disrupt their own thinking. Yeah.
Lorna, my son, I love my son. He is embedded in the corporate world, and I know he can't. He has no, and he has 2 little ones now, and he has no time to think about all of this stuff to help save the planet, and he's trapped. And so I you know, I totally understand what you're saying. I didn't mean to other, you know, with that chart, I didn't mean to other people, you know, but I was just trying to clarify, where are they? Why can't they help? Why don't he has no time to help.
Yeah, I'd say that I totally agree that, you know, time is probably the scarcest resource. Why don't they help? I think that that's probably the statement which might, yeah, I think they are trying to find the way to help. Therefore, they're trying to make sense of how come, yeah, most of them are doing things in their communities. They're not doing nothing. It's how they help differently, how they incorporate this into their business model, that this isn't just about corporate giving or sending people off on a retreat. This actually becomes about how they run their business, how they live, how they think, how they release creativity in an organization, and see that an organization is more than the four walls. You know, you talked about your son being trapped. I see this every single day of, you know, leaders totally myopic until they get a little bit more woke around this. But once you start releasing the inspiration, the creativity, and they come outside of themselves, you get the immense creativity, and they come together across their functions and silos, and they start working together. So there is, so I mean, this is kind of what we do in Zenergy, is, you know, go through that journey with leaders, teams, and organizations about understanding what their current gridlock is, why they have no time, why their business might not be working the way it did, why people are leaving, and to work through that and to think from a very different place. And the act of doing that, because it's very much a personal thing for leaders, and not just for the leaders, also for the people, because it's a new collaboration between leaders and their staff. You know, this thing, you know, leadership is a mindset. So we've got to rethink roles and responsibilities, and whose responsibility is it? And, you know, yes, it does start with the individual, and leaders and organizations need to create the conditions for this. And it's a journey to do that. But I do believe that there is an immense curiosity. They're all finding the way. There are laggards in that, and you know, your adoption curve, I think, is spot on. You know, it's a classic marketing curve, and it's spot on. There will always be the laggards, and there will always be those that do it first. But even those that do it first, if you go back to, you know, some of the Googles and Facebooks when they kind of started all having integrating home life and work life, and, you know, they had games rooms in the organization and everything, you know, they've been through their own struggles around that too. So you have to create a healthy workspace too. And sometimes the best intentions end up with the most toxic environments because the deeper work hasn't been done. It's a journey. And so I think we need to encourage people on the journey and show them how it can be more, create more success in a different, but not just for the organization, for everybody, for the world. And it's back to the new vision.
Lorna and Stanford, we are, Lev is doing some magic here and allowing us to have a little bit more extra time, but we would like to hear other voices as well in the flow. Daryl has his hand up. One sec, Daryl. I just want to mention that I'm hearing in this conversation the challenge and the opportunity to both exercise discernment, so important, so we can discern what is healthy, what is not, and to also explore how to minimize judgment. So that judgment is not something we engage in, because that is something which can then usually comes from, and this I think, Sandy, is something that Lorna is pointing out very helpfully, when we categorize, label others, then immediately it becomes they're them, and that category of them is the problem, and we are not, and they are. And then we start to us and them. And once we us and them, really we've identified people as problems, and people aren't problems, situations are. But how do we then engage? How do we human well? Well, these are the things we're exploring throughout this. I'm sorry, Lev, that I jumped in with this. We're both co-facilitating here, so thank you with that. I'm going to just move straight ahead, if you don't mind, Lev, and just ask Daryl to unmute and to share.
Okay, I am driving, so I'm going to just pull it aside so that I can pay attention properly. Can you hear me okay? Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay, great. Okay, great. So, you know, I thought just a couple of things. I'm on my way to my Pilates workout, but I'm so glad I got a chance to chime in. And when I finish this workout, hopefully I'll chime back in and hook up. But it was a very thought-provoking piece or presentation, and a couple of things. I don't see it the way it was just related that these categories are somehow making it us and them. I think it's simply a descriptor. That's how I look at it, describing groups of people, not necessarily to be interpreted as us and them. It made me appreciate, my thought immediately went to where did these categories come from and why 2 billion, why 1 million. But anyway, it was thought-provoking. And now, one thing that really struck me that I thought really made sense in my experience, and that was the Men's Center. I'm very much aware of how society has just really not embraced and properly allowed women in the world to take the leadership role for which I think the world really needs right now. But with that becomes a real dysfunctioning of how men identify themselves now. And it's particularly pronounced, in my opinion, in the African-American community, of which 1/3 of men in the African-American community have either been incarcerated or essentially missing. And that's a large part of the population. And so I work with a couple of different groups that deal with recidivism and things like that. And I just think it's a wonderful idea of trying to refresh what it means to be a man in the modern day, because both my sons' wives are the real economic powerhouse in their households. Nevertheless, my sons are very successful in their own right. And oh, by the way, one of the things I thought was very useful in Living Cities Earth, when we were given the opportunity to say, well, I'm going to engage at 25%, 50%, 75%. This was a really good thing. So I could categorically say, okay, I need to address and be plugged into this very essential entity, phenomena, movement, whatever you want to call it. It's part of what I need to do in my life. And so in so doing, how do I engage when I know I have all these other things I'm doing, which are just as important, but this is inspirationally important and just basic to my personal well-being. And with that, I'll say this last little thing, and that is, both my sons, in spite of their fact that they're very successful in their own right, their wives as equally as successful, basically they found the time to volunteer their time to do various things in the community. 20%, 15%, they both volunteer in various ways to help people who are not as fortunate as they have been in life. And I'm just amazed at it. This is why I call my sons my heroes, because somehow, way, shape, or form, they write music, they go out on tours and do things with at-risk youth and so on and so forth. And they were doing this since the age of 22, 23, when the people they were hanging out with, I knew were ex-gang members. And I'm thinking, despite their care in wanting to make communities better, I'm thinking to myself, well, son, you're driving around with an ex-gang banger, and you may just get shot because you're with them and you're about the same age. I was more afraid for them and felt bad that I was feeling that way, because I love my sons, and I thought, well, they just don't understand how dangerous it is hanging out with these ex-gang bangers, even though they've never been involved with that, but they were the same age. So I make that point to point out, there are ways, despite being involved with your profession, corporation, whatever it is you're doing, if you care enough and it really matters to you, you will find 10%, 15%, 20%. And I just love that idea. I would love to see and hear more about it. Stanford, I appreciate the presentation. It really was thought-provoking. And anyway, I just want to share that. And thank you guys for making this so. I'm going to plug back in after I finish my Pilates class. That's all I have.
Daryl, thank you. Daryl, I put a link in. I put the Wise Boys and Wise Men document in the chat. So it's a PDF. So just take it and open it up and contact.
I will. Thank you.
Let's be in touch, man.
Absolutely. I look forward to it. With that, guys, I have to sign off and go do my workout, and I'll be back. Bye-bye.
Lev, I want to make sure your voice is in here in the flow as well. I would love to hear anything from Tim. And also, we have Ronit with us, who has texted me. She's on the Leap Forward, beautiful spiral there, and any reflections from her. But Tim, may I invite you to share?
Yeah, so there's lots and lots of things to speak to in what you presented, Sandy. But I'll maybe just cycle back to one thing around this. So I guess the community learning schools. Is it community learning schools?
Lab, anything, call it whatever
Yeah,
you
lab,
want.
school, living, learning labs. Yeah, community learning labs. And something I've concluded of late is one thinks that there's you have a community and the community does things, and I think it also might be the other way around, that the community is born out of doing things together, and I think maybe that could be the hook, because I was thinking also just as the definition of there's 2 million who, well, they probably care but they can't afford to do much, and then or 2 billion and et cetera, et cetera. And I think of that 2 billion that have the ability but don't seem to care, or maybe it's like that the invitation and the opportunity to actually be part of something. I remember many years ago, the weekend, and through my mother, there's a group of people that got together, and we were filling these trucks with boxes of food and clothing, and sending it to a town in Latvia, about this 20 years ago probably. And I kind of just picked up on this. There's me and a whole bunch of guys I've never met before, parents a few bit older than me, and we're just like hauling these boxes and loading it up and like doing the kind of chatting that guys do when they don't really know each other, and try to crack jokes and all that. But and it was like it was a cold day, and like 2-3 hours out of a Sunday, and we were all helping their lugging and packing and doing things, and I realized that, well, actually we all felt really, really good about it. I think all of us felt like this was the best 3 hours of my week and possibly my month, because we were doing something really practical that really helps other people that we want and most likely never meet. But that sensation, and we did it together. We were like, so we've got a chain of boxes that you're moving, and that means just everyone is part of this chain, So again, you're part of that community, that function, that interbeing in a sense. So I think there's probably a lot to be found in this idea of structured volunteerism, giving people the opportunity to be part of a community or create community. And I'd say, if I was going to step back and reflect larger, I mean, I grew up in Sweden, very strong, or used to be very strong socialist country. I mean, the Social Democratic Party had like 80% of the votes back in 1920, 1930. Remained probably up until the 60s could rule on its own, because it always had more than 50%, and then 70s, 80s, it started losing a bit of power, and had to rely on the Communist Party to stay in power, and then eventually now has shrunken to have still the biggest party at 30%, but it's not as significant as it was. And the reason that this happened was that it was a party for the workers. But as it fought for the workers to get more and more resources, the workers became middle class. And middle class people aren't worried about the same thing as working class people are, as you see everywhere. And all of a sudden you've got stuff, and now you don't want to lose your stuff, So you sort of just slip over to the right. So I mean, it's kind of ironically, you slip down the spiral dynamics in a sense.
Right.
But so, and I think that the tactical mistake of many tactical mistakes wasn't to realize that as we become more affluent, we become less dependent on each other. And so community plays less of a role the more money you have. As I like to think of money as that which replaces relationships. The more money you have, the less relationships you need, so if you're super rich, you kind of almost kill your humanity, because you're so severed, because you don't have any relationships, because everything you buy in life. But if you're poor, everything is relationships based. So I think that the strategic thing to do when you go from like a working class socialist country to an affluent middle class country, you sort of have to plan, well, maybe we should work on everybody going from working 5 days a week to 4 days a week, but 1 day a week goes to the community. So you put in structured community as a part of your culture. You're expected to work for the community 1 day a week. You don't have to go to your office or your factory, but you work for community. You pick what you want to do, and in that you now form those powerful relationships. So that
Tim, you should write that book, The New Social Democracy. That would be an amazing, really, with the history of the social democracy in Sweden. That's an amazing piece. I never knew that. I never knew the evolution of it, and I didn't understand, why does Sweden keep moving to the right? So that you explained it, and you should write that book.
Well, thank you. Well, I'll pop it in a chat for my upcoming book. This could actually work. Some thinky thoughts of future civilization. But let me see if there's any final point. No, but so I think it's that, again, that like we are hardwired into forming communities, and we need to create cultures that support that allow us to form communities, and then that's what we'll do. And then, yes, my final point, because then we discover that there are more currencies than money. There's my lights. As Alexander likes to point out, there are a number of different values in life, more than money. And once you see that, then helping becomes it becomes strange not to help. And the same thing, I think, of all those people, that 2 billion people or 1 billion people that are affluent and don't care, if they walked across the street and they saw a kid drowning, very few of them wouldn't like jump in that lake to help the kid. So I mean, that is innate with us. So we just need to show them and make it more visible, and then I think these things will start happening. So that's my pitch.
Awesome, Tim. Awesome. I'm gonna smoothly ask Lev if he can share, and also check in with Lev, because Lev is, I don't know if he has some kind of reserve charging powerhouse here that lets him continue to operate, because he is nonstop with us, which is such a blessing. And I hope you're doing okay, Lev. Do you have enough energy to keep going? This is outrageous. You're here all the time. It's wonderful.
I'm doing very well, and that's exactly the reason I believe that communities could be vibrant, actually, in any part of the world with any economic conditions. So I really appreciate different perspectives, because they open up my world. I don't, understand everybody's personal or even collective situation. So I'm learning all the time. But what I understand, that what is really universal are those 6 points I discovered before, the 6 dimensions in one of the prior sessions. Whether we live in South Africa or South America or South Asia, in northern sort of richer countries, totalitarian or democratic, we all have our bodies. We all have our subtle energy. We all have our sense of identity, our intelligence, soul, and spirit. That's universal. Without this, we are not fully humans, right? We are not fully alive. For most people, those 6 dimensions are not really activated. So many people don't know what spirit is. Most people don't even understand what really soul is. I myself, before you would tell me spirit, soul, I would have no understanding what it is, maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago. At least not like something very as a tangible experience in my life. So I understand that the majority of people in the cities today don't have those experiences. They are lacking a basic sort of universal understanding of who they are as complex living beings. And so for me, vibrant communities, of course, they start with vibrant individuals, right? If we have sort of half-dead people walking around and they unite around some cause, there will never be a vibrant community, right? So it always starts with working with individual people. And again, who works with them? Those are the leaders. Well, you could have different names. It could be facilitators, sort of evangelists. It could be sort of change leaders, city makers, etc. So names are different, but I call them leaders of positive change just for the simplicity. And who are these leaders? Well, this is us. And people whom we connect to, right? So the change on the global scale starts with us having enough energy, us mastering our subtle sort of channels, right? To have inspiration to be able to pass it on to other people, being healthy enough to be able to sustain as one of my colleagues, and Alexander knows him, Pavel Luksha said, he said, if you live in a totalitarian or semi-totalitarian country, you need to live for a long time in order to see the results of your positive action. It takes a long time to create change. So we need to take care of ourselves on all of those 6 levels, right? To open up our spiritual power. Otherwise, how do we inspire people if we don't have spiritual connection, right? And Sandy was speaking about it. To connect with our true self, our soul, sort of. Otherwise, how can we enrich other people's experience in their life by helping them and inspiring them to connect to their true self, right? So I would say that vibrant communities always starts with us because we are talking about them. So I'm not trying to create some knowledge which will be sort of separate and exist without us. I think we go out to the world. Alexander deals with many, many individuals. Lorna speaks with many people and helps many people. Team is creating a global sort of several actually global projects, right? Like CODU and Social Systems Lab, etc. Connectathon, right? Connectathon. Yep. Yeah. And so many others of our friends and colleagues. So my sense is that vibrant communities in the cities, of course, they exist and they develop without us, but our role, why we are discussing this, is to support the emergence of a global network of such communities where they could share across the borders, across the cultures, some key, I would say, resources like vision. It's free to share. With the internet, it flows freely all over the world, like inspiration to have events like this and many different other events where we come and we see people with, open heart and sort of shining eyes, etc., etc. But also sharing resources. If a team, for example, develops his application, the CODU, for collaboration, communication of different projects around the world, maybe we could join in. I could chip in my sort of 5 euros, right? Into this program or process, and so on and so forth. Lorna has amazing connections, and she's doing with her team amazing job in many countries on both profit and non-profit part. So my guess is that the vibrant communities in the cities start with us being vibrant. And I was never the way I am today. So I really developed step by step the energy, the understanding. I speak foreign language, which is not how it's called, native to me at all, right? So I learned, and every one of us, we would and we do all the time, we make those steps, and I invite everyone who is watching us today on YouTube or will be watching the recording we'll be sending around, to please think about, I think Mahatma Gandhi said, right? Be the change you want to see in the world. So vibrant communities in anywhere, they start with you. And how you connect to other leaders and how you create global networks which support vibrant communities worldwide. That's my first point, and we still have some time. So one small point on the action networks. How we move from just being a community which enjoys life, which is good enough. Maybe that's the most important, but how do we move to be an action community, right? Because if you need to create action, you need emotion, right? Energy, you need the purpose, the vision. Then you create some structures and processes to be effective in what you do. So I think we need to share experience because I'm sure there are some very, very effective communities out there and networks. And we need to bring them together. Those which are more evolved, like, for example, I don't know what you think about it, but there is this Rotary Club organization. It's sort of local leaders coming together, worldwide. And I spoke with several of their country heads. They're very enthusiastic about what they do. They bring together local business people, government people, sort of social and non-for-profit organizations, and they create change. It's different. It's not the evolutionary leadership as we define it. It's more sort of day-to-day practical, like create a local garden and this and that, but it's also very important. But they have amazing effectiveness in how they structure their work. They existed for more than 100 years now, but still. So could we learn from them or from other sort of more established organizations and share those experiences with the younger ones, right? To do this, we need to create connections for the information to flow around, for the knowledge to know-how to flow around. So that I guess is my final point, that everything we're talking about starts with ourselves. We're not the center of the universe, of course, right? We're just the channels for the creative energy to go through us. But if we do it together and we invite other people and we do it step by step on a global basis, because we have this global vision, the 10,000 cities, etc., I believe it will take time. Maybe it will take more time than we even expect. Maybe 5 years, maybe 20 years, maybe 100 years. So we're in no rush. There is a beautiful expression: the nature does not hurry, yet it accomplishes everything. So we're in no hurry. We accept all the challenges, and we are on this beautiful path together. Alexander, thank you very much. I pass it on to you.
That is Lao Tzu. Thank you so much for that. Yes, all things get done, even though their nature does not push it. This is a core tenet of Taoism, indeed. And I think also, to pick up on your reference to Mahatma Gandhi and his saying, his admonition. By the way, his full admonition starts, the first word is first. Be the change you wish to see in the world. And that first is often forgotten. And people sometimes go straight to the be the change you want to see in the world. It's not enough. It's first, be the change you wish to see in the world, because this is the first step to engaging and connecting and bringing this forward into manifestation. But I think I can share with you today the shirt that I'm wearing, because I'm put it on purpose here specifically because I think this is the next step. And that is this one: to be the systems you want to see in the world. But you see, by the way, I'm going to go through this, and Tim knows this, and I think Sandy does as well. It says here, be you in the world, right? Be you in the world. But it also says the systems want to see. So to be the systems you want to see in the world, it is important that we have empathy with the systems that are emerging. What is it that wants to see, that is seeking to emerge, that is healthy, whole? How can we be the living systems? How can we be the living cities that we want to see in the world? And I think, Lev, you spoke directly to that. And that is about how we bring this into our own being, into our incarnate being, into our embodiment, and then into our inaction, right? And this is the flow. Tim, you were talking about this very clearly as well. So yes, and now I would like to just see if there, Lev, actually, I'm going to check in with you here, because if I understand correctly, we have 2 minutes. Is that correct? All right. Well, in 2 minutes, I think what I would like to do, we're not going to have time for a full go around, but any final reflections or words? I'm going to call on people, and we're going to give you something like 15 seconds. Sandy.
Oh, thanks for inviting me in. It's been wonderful. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Sandy. You shared so richly. Lorna.
Unmute myself. What's going through my mind at the moment is, again, the narrative, and how do we help people connect more communities and so on, and connect people to that more spiritual place as well. And the shifting the narrative on what's happening in the world right now. This is the biggest opportunity for a spiritual connection, and to find the light in real crisis, to move from urgency and emergency to a real sense of illumination and possibility. I think that's an exciting opportunity that we can consider. So shifting the narrative is where I'm leaving this.
Shifting the narrative and finding that alchemical twist that we can do to transmute crisis to opportunity. Right. Beautiful. Tim.
Yeah, and I think Lorna touched on something important, that this is a spiritual thing we are exploring, and I think that spirit probably gave us hope back way before civilization was imagined, and then we moved into, eventually we ended up in civilization, and spirit was pushed to one side as nonsense because now we have other stuff, and now we're discovering that we need spirit to function. It's really what motivates us and moves us. And the second thought is that we've moved from being collective beings to being hyper individualized, and now we're coming back from individual into the community again. So we can return to being into being, but we have the perspective on the individuality which we didn't have before. I think those are two meta trends going on.
Thank you, Tim. Cool. Seeing the big picture and flowing with it. Thank you. Lev.
How beautiful. Thank you so much for this discussion today.
We are levitated.
Oh.
All right. We transition now to our next discussion, which is so exciting. Goodness, all of these are exciting. Now, if you can stay on, wonderful. But are we going to take more or less, do we have a moment of break here, Lev?
We have a 1 minute break, so we'll switch the gears. And in 1 minute, we invite you to watch here or on YouTube, the Catalyzing Time. It will be the interview with Jude Caravan, the cosmologist, author, and evolutionary leader. Many people know her, of course. And it was taken by Marilyn Hamilton, the founder of Integral City Measures. But now 1 minute break, and then we start. So thank you very much. Wow, you have made it. You just watched amazing insights from experts of Living Cities Earth ecosystem. We welcome you to the Living Cities Earth experience and hope that we are going for a long ride as we take care of ourselves, our communities, our cities, and our planet. Thank you and welcome.